love goes on, softly on. So don't be sighing or crying. Here live with our
Welcome to part 2 of this Lawyers, Guns, and Money's broadcast. Lawyers, Guns, and Money's. What's the name of the blog I write for? I don't even know anymore.
It's Lawyers, Guns, and Money.
Yes, or any of the other places I write. But the second part of our broadcast on Cripples, Bastards, and Broken Things. As we left off in part 1, which you probably just finished watching because you are a loyal and dedicated viewer of these or listener of these podcasts, Stephen had just announced to the world that he had a grand conspiracy theory which proves everything that was going to happen did happen. Well, I'll just let him explain.
Yeah, I mean, specifically it's a conspiracy theory about the death of Sir Hugh of the Vale, which is kind of one of the most one of the first really dramatic on-screen deaths in the season. And unlike previous on-screen deaths like
Will
or Sir Waymar Royce, etc., it's not done as it's not done as a quick shot cut or something like that. It's like they really linger on like how much blood can they get to pump out of this guy's throat. So here's my theory. I think that Littlefinger engineered Sir Hugh of the Vale's death in order to make it appear to Ned Stark that this was a Lannister cover-up, when in fact it was actually Littlefinger covering up his own misdeeds. And here's my theory. One of the actually, can we put like a 5-second spoiler warning on this?
All right, y'all got 5 seconds.
All right,
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You were going to have the...
Okay.
Yeah, go.
Okay. In Book 3, it's revealed that Littlefinger is responsible for killing Jon Arryn. And specifically, he's the one who's set up the Starks and Lannisters against each other in order to create a civil war which he can then profit from. One of the interesting questions is, how did he know what Jon Arryn was up to? I mean, clearly the importance of Jon Arryn is that he found, here is an important person who's close to the Starks, who has just found something out about the Lannisters that, if I can tell the Starks what he found out, or if I can lead them to find out what he found out, would provide a sufficient motive for the Lannisters to assassinate him. And then he assassinates him. The question, one of the subsidiary questions is, well, how did he know what Jon Arryn was doing? And one of the theories I've had is that Sir Hugh of the Vale was one of his spies. And the reason for this is that Sir Hugh of the Vale fits the profile of Littlefinger agents. Namely, he's someone from a kind of marginal background, right? He's a highborn, he's a squire, etc. But he doesn't have any money. And specifically, right after Jon Arryn dies, he gets knighted and comes into a fat inheritance that's enough from Jon Arryn, that's enough to get him his shot in the tourney. And if you look at a lot of the other Littlefinger agents that we're introduced to later in the series, although it's quite possible they'll be left out of the show, they fit the same profile, namely someone of low background who needs money and who Littlefinger has met before. He has a long-standing relationship with. So, for example, the Kettle Blacks, he knows from their time as sellswords. He knows Sir Hugh of the Vale because Littlefinger comes from the Vale, and he spent time around Jon Arryn. So my theory was that essentially Sir Hugh of the Vale spied on Littlefinger, spied on John Aaron for Littlefinger. That's how Littlefinger realized what John Aaron had figured out. And that gave him his kind of opportunity to start this civil war. And then what he does is he tells Ned Stark about Sir Hugh of the Vale in such a way that he knows that the kid's not going to spill the beans, right? Because he's a newly made knight. He's very full of himself. He's not going to answer a summons from a non-knight. He specifically says, don't go in person. And then he has Sir Hugh of the Vale killed right in front of Ned Stark. And
except Ned wasn't there. Ned wasn't at the tournament. Remember, that's like the first thing Cersei said when she walks in. She says, "Isn't this your tournament?" And he says, "Just because it's my name on it."
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. He is present in the books.
Yeah.
Sorry, so that's why I got confused. Okay. And he's immediately there. I mean,
wait, hold on, wait. We need to mark this. This is the first time I've stumped you. All right, okay.
Okay, cool.
Memorialized. I take what I can get.
Yeah. So, he has this kid killed right in front of Ned Stark. The next scene that is reproduced in both the show and the book is Ned Stark does this sort of CSI moment where, he's meeting with Sir Barristan over the kid's body. And Ned Stark really, really, really starts to believe in a Lannister conspiracy to thwart him. So I think it's kind of this masterful misdirection on Littlefinger's part to essentially, this is the moment where Ned Stark really starts to believe what Littlefinger is telling him, and now isn't looking for anyone but the Lannisters when it comes to this overall conspiracy. So that's my grand conspiracy theory. And
that is actually a grand one, because what you're basically saying is that the entire War for the Seven Kingdoms is being started by this one murder of a seemingly insignificant marginal figure. That this is what sets it all. I mean, John Aaron's death obviously is right, but Littlefinger puts it in motion.
Yeah, I mean, Littlefinger is the architect of the war.
Yeah.
No question. That's explicitly stated in the books. It's more that just there's this additional little detail where you can see his hand at work in arranging the deaths of people in such a way that they prove the most useful to him.
I guess what I'm saying is, for people who are watching or listening to this who haven't read the books, one of the problems getting through these early episodes is you're never sure what the stakes are or what is supposed to be an important moment. And what you're saying is that this is sort of the culmination of one set of Littlefinger's plans and the beginning of another.
Yeah.
Right? And the fact that this is coming right at the end of the episode, which, the producers of Game of Thrones love to throw you these sort of important moments that you don't really entirely understand, such as this episode actually ends with Tyrion being surrounded.
Yeah.
But this comes before that. And
again, another action that Littlefinger is responsible for, because he's the one who lied to the Starks about
the knife,
who the dagger came from, and got them to think that it was Tyrion. Now, he probably didn't know that, Catelyn and Tyrion were going to bump into each other. He probably thought that Ned Stark would arrest Tyrion. But he planted the seeds.
Yeah, and in a sense, I mean, if you want to think about this, and because we're already doing the Game of Thrones podcast, so I'll just be totally nerdy and say I also used to study chess, and this is sort of like solid pawn structure, right? Mm-hmm. You get your pawns, and that way, no matter what your opponent does, you have something that is both a means of attack and a means of protection with a sort of solid, opening couple of moves, and that really does seem to be the position Littlefinger's in. He can't predict that, Tyrion's going to run into Cat, but he's made it so that if that happens, or even if Tyrion runs into anyone who is
Stark,
that there's going to be a problem, and that's why the I guess third scene in the episode is so interesting, because it's not Tyrion running into someone, it's Tyrion walking into Winterfell like, I have a present.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, really? You have a present for us? Is it a dagger?
Yeah, and that's the thing is that they kind of nicely underplay that scene. In the book, you have unfortunately what I call stupid Rob, which is he's like waving his sword around, and I'm you can really see why they kind of choked that back, but it's still like he's acting hostile.
Yeah.
And in fact, you get the wolves attacking Tyrion again for the second time, which is kind of a weird little running detail. So that clearly, like, they see him as a threat, and they don't understand why he's doing something nice. And it points to Littlefinger's unique style as a conspirator, which is he's a gambler, he's an improviser. For example, the dagger, right? He had no way to know that that was coming, right? Because the second attack on Bran ultimately has nothing to do with Littlefinger. It just happens. But the moment he sees that dagger, and he's with Catelyn, he just makes this gamble, and it's really risky because if anybody had said what really happened to that dagger, the Starks would know that he was deceiving them.
Well, I might disagree a little, but and just to use the analogy I just brought up with pawn structure, it's you can bring your bishop out and then realize that you've made a mistake and pull it back. And I think that's sort of what, if you have that sort of solid base. I don't think he's really a gambler. I think he knows how to set up a good solid.
I disagree. I mean, think about what he's doing, right? He's standing right in front of Varys, right? And
okay, go.
And lying about something that Varys knows the truth about. So potentially he's massively opened himself up against Varys, right? This is something, the dagger is something that Renly knows about, because Renly likes to gamble on these matches. Robert knows about it because he's the guy who won the dagger, right? If Eddard asks anybody about this, he's going to find out that Littlefinger lied to him about something incredibly important. And keep in mind, Littlefinger doesn't really know Ned very much. Ned hasn't been at court. He hasn't had a chance to observe him. He's gambling on this guy reacting in the way that he thinks he will, and that Catelyn will react in the things he will, and that all of these other schemers are not going to take advantage of this opening. And it's a kind of gambling that he'll do later on. So, for example, again, this is spoiler, in Book 3, right, when Lysa completely cracks, and he has to kill her, that's a huge gamble, right? He's built up this enormous investment in the Vale as a source of his power, and it's all through his marriage to Lysa, and he completely undoes it in a second, and then gambles his way into making it work for him. So, and the contrast here is with Varys, where Varys hangs back, and he's very methodical. So that, for example, he knows that Littlefinger lied about the dagger, but he doesn't say anything. He doesn't tell Ned. He keeps that back and will use it when he wants to. So the analogy I always use is like a jazz player versus a classical composer.
Well, I would like to make another analogy based on something we discussed earlier that was not recorded, but this is why the first thing he said when I mentioned the blog post by George R. R. Martin about how Walter White from Breaking Bad is worse than anyone on, you immediately went for, no, he's not. He's analogous to Littlefinger, because that's the sort of, I see how you're envisioning Littlefinger. And that's a very sort of Walter White, like I have all of my ducks in a row, and then all of a sudden I'm just going to kick them for a second just to, see what happens. It's sort of both this sort of master manipulator and that sort of underlying awful impulsiveness to just take the big risk. So I think I see now why you immediately went to Littlefinger, whereas I was headed, toward the Boltons or But you're like, no. Walter White is Littlefinger. I mean,
if you think about it, there's a similar kind of pathological focus on grievances, right? Littlefinger has, saddled the country with a vicious civil war, essentially because a girl he liked didn't like him back.
And you saw that thing I posted from Todd Vanderwolf about...
Yes, I did.
Yes, about Todd Vanderwolf, the TV writer for The Onion, who's also my other boss, wrote a thing about Walter White as the, sort of aggrieved male. He is, the fount of all male, white male privilege. And I see exactly what you're saying, that Littlefinger is sort of the same way. They harboring the grudges forever.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, welcome to the Lawyers, Guns, and Money podcast on Breaking Bad, which we seem to have transitioned into. No, but getting back to Game of Thrones. I really think that those of you who have not read the books, it's really interesting to think about what Stephen's saying about this particular moment and how it's going to resonate going forward, because it's something you would almost miss, right? And that's how Littlefinger works. He doesn't work with, right? You might not even sort of notice that.
And sort of harkening back to our brief discussion of the Bourne movies, this is an example of good tradecraft, right? This is Jean Le Carré as opposed to Ludlum, which is that he works through cutouts. He works through people who are disposable. And, potentially we're going to see in Season 4 exactly how Littlefinger cleans up his messes. While keeping his hands very clean. So, you definitely get the sense that, there are all of these tiny little things on which everything hinges on that he makes use of. And why, even though in many ways Littlefinger is an incredibly obvious mustache-twirling villain that nobody likes or trusts, he's still able to succeed because he works from a remove that makes it very hard to see what he's doing.
But this is why I think sort of the visuals of this death at the tournament are sort of so important, because you have to linger on the blood spurting out of his neck. You have to really hammer home, because it is such a sort of incidental seeming moment, that this is a moment of real awfulness. And another really significant part of this is that we talked in a previous podcast about Arya's first kill, and how important it was that they film it in a way that makes you realize that she understands the consequences of what she's doing. Until then, she'd been sort of in this almost wish fulfillment mode of saying prayers to herself, but this is her first real action. What we see in episode 4 of the first season is she witnesses her first death right in front of her, and Brian Kirk, the director, ignores it. He cuts almost immediately to Sansa and Littlefinger as Littlefinger tells her the story of the Hound.
Yes.
And Arya literally gets...
Oh, yeah, okay. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, Arya literally gets cut out of the frame.
Yeah.
They focus in on something. But if you think about it in the larger sense, this is a really important moment. This is the first time Arya has had to watch someone die. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is because this is clearly an important part of the culture. That's why they had brought Bran to Will's execution in the first episode. Right? Arya didn't get to witness that. She doesn't know what a good death looks like.
Right, and
this is her first.
A bad death.
Exactly. All right, now go on with what you're going to say about...
Okay, so, I think I would normally say the first season of Game of Thrones is quite good. It makes very few mistakes. And it's going to get better from here on out. Starting with episode 5 all the way through episode 10, it just starts getting better and better and better. A major misstep, and this is something that fans of the show have been howling about from the moment it happens, is that there's a foundational moment in the relationship between Sansa and Sandor Clegane where he tells her the story about how he got burnt. That does not happen because for some reason they choose to put it in the mouth of Littlefinger. And hopefully, Scott, you can link the YouTube clip, which is Rory McCann giving that speech, which is amazingly well done, just incredibly powerful. And it's in the books, it's vitally important because I have this theory that Sansa in the first book is about the deconstruction of romantic medievalism, right? The idea that all knights are brave and just, all ladies are fair, and that you can tell who's the bad guy from the good guy by who's pretty and who's...
As all of my medievalist friends will undoubtedly start shouting as soon as you said that. No, it does it itself. The medieval epics are... Everyone's an idiot. They just run around and they sort of take care of that themselves. But I do see what you're saying.
Well, I'm not talking about the medieval era. I'm talking about medievalism within romantic literature.
Post-romantic, yeah. Thinking of early 20th century going forward. Yes.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
You know, all those Victorians who got insanely interested in jousting. I mean, that's a bizarre element of Victorian culture, is that all of these, industrial robber barons start putting on armor and trying to knock each other with sticks. And here's this moment, right, where you have this girl who believes in the stories, and she sees this young, handsome knight get murdered by a monster, right? And then this evil-looking person, someone who, when she first sees him, terrifies her, tells her this story of the truth behind knighthood. That's the specific focus of this story. Is he says there is no such thing as a good knight, because Gregor Clegane is a knight, and look what he did to me. He destroyed my face, because he can. And
the other, this is just sort of kind of adding to it. Obviously, the Hound is another broken thing. Except he's not a broken thing. He's a thing that has been broken. And also, I think it's important that Sansa sees this in the context of sort of state-sanctioned killing, because the tournament allows for this sort of there's not going to be any revenge. If this happens at a tournament,
it's an accident.
It's an accident, and you won't have any blood vendettas against the families.
And that's the interesting thing that sets up the fight with the Knight of Flowers next time round. I mean, if we want to talk about solidarity, right? Sandor has just been made to watch his brother casually murder somebody, and he knows that it was deliberate because he knows how good Gregor Clegane is.
Yeah.
And he couldn't do anything about it because it was way too fast. The next episode, we're going to get this moment where Sansa is all up into her head about the Knight of Flowers, and she got the red rose, and this is just like the stories, and oh my god, he's so handsome, and she has no gaydar. And Sandor finally is able to act against his brother to save the life of someone who's helpless. And what's interesting is that the outcome of that is that Sandor Clegane wins the Knight's tourney. And as it's written in the book, it's the first and only time that he's had the love of the crowd, that he's fitted into this world of stories that kind of sets a framework of how people like Sansa are supposed to understand how things work. And it's just, it's another act of solidarity.
Well, we'll talk more about that next time, because I have some more things to say about that. But I think we could we've got the grand conspiracy out there. We've given people an hour and 45 minutes of listening to us. And honestly, I am sick and tired of the asshole I keep looking at in my screen, which is me, for the record, not Steven. I see my face when I.
Yeah, and
I'm just tired of myself. Yeah, so I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope the extreme length of this has sort of made up for our absence, and that you really enjoyed this. And this has been another Lawyers, Guns and Money podcast, and we will see you next week, actually, because we will be moving on to the next episode next week. All right. So we will see you soon.